Hello, and welcome to my Patreon page. My name's Tim, and this is where I make tabletop audio. I'm a composer and a sound designer from Brooklyn, New York. I started tabletop audio 4 years ago when my sons and I began playing role-playing games together. I thought having situational audio to complement the actions around the table would increase our immersion in the story, and so as a test, I created a few tracks for our next session. The result was amazing. My kids, who were 7 and 10 at the time, became much more focused on the game. Their descriptions became more detailed and more thoughtful, and they started to think as their characters rather than themselves. I was definitely inspired to make more. A few months later, with about 12 tracks, I wondered if they might have a similar effect on someone else's table, and so I created the website and made the ambiences available for everyone. Tabletop audio is ad-free. It's 100% supported by people like you who donate whatever they feel comfortable with each month. All donation levels receive the same content. I do occasionally make alternate versions of tracks available to patrons, but the website is and will always be free. I couldn't do any of this without Patreon. Operating the site costs money. I have server costs, bandwidth costs, equipment costs, studio costs, and my time. Patreon's monthly donation system gives me the financial support I need to continue making content. Patreon makes it easy to edit or stop your monthly donations at any time. And because donations to tabletop audio are monthly and not per item released, you never have to worry about your bill being higher than expected. When you become a Patreon supporter of the site, you're not just subscribing to new sounds, you're helping support the entire body of work. The hosting and bandwidth costs, the studio costs, the thousands of hours of work that have already gone into the site. Ambiences take anywhere from 6 to 12 hours to create, sound pads take a week or more. Knowing that there's a steady source of income lets me focus on creating more content. So welcome, thank you again for visiting this page, and I hope you become a supporter of me and the site.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Attack of Opportunity. That's right, I'm not even renting Matt. If he's around, he's around. You know, if I put this in the post edit, his awesome voice doing our intro, it's a thing. I keep bringing it up and I'm sorry, but today, a special Christmas gift. Now, we do not like dating our podcasts because sometimes it takes 3 weeks to a month. Sometimes we put stuff down for an entire season before it comes to you. But I'm planning on releasing this specific video and audio as a Christmas gift right before Christmas to you because it is a rare, rare treat that we get to interview somebody that has unknowingly contributed to our podcast and our work. I'm not talking about a behind the scenes, talking to one of my buddies. I'm not talking about somebody lucky enough that we're working with back and forth. I'm talking about somebody who puts up content on the net, free of charge, free use, copyright free, and we just dig into it with our teeth and nails. I'm talking to Tim from tabletopaudio.com. Tim, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Jeff. Nice to be here.
So we're going to jump right into a whole bunch of uncomfortable questions, or as uncomfortable as I can make them. To start off, to explain the website itself, Tabletop Audio is a website that's also linked into the jukebox in Roll20 for free ambience audio, sound effects, and your new sound pad, which we will touch on a little bit later. But first, we need to get to know the man. So our first question that we always like to ask our victims is, was there a defining moment where you knew you were a geek, a nerd, into it? Or perhaps I should modify this question today and say, what came first, the composer or the nerd?
Oh, definitely the nerd.
Good. I was hoping you'd say that.
Because nerdhood starts at a very young age. I think it's about, to me, a nerd is somebody who's just passionate about something and does it and gets into their passion without any regard for what other people might think. So you can be a nerd. The popular culture term today, nerd, is like somebody who's into comic books and role-playing games or whatever. And but I think you could be a nerd for any subject. You could be a music nerd. You can be an architecture nerd, whatever you're really super into. So as a kid, I was just, I didn't know I was a nerd. I was just really into comics. I was really into sci-fi books. I was really into all kinds of things that are now considered nerdy. Star Wars, Star Trek, all that stuff. The composing came so much later. From the time, I mean, I started playing violin when I was 4, so I started as a musician, but it never occurred to me to write my own music. And then I started, playing in bands and stuff, and we started recording in bands, and I became interested in the recording process and what can I do, to kind of further that. And I got interested in the toys and the gear and the,
Could you name those bands without getting in trouble? Is that stuff still floating
No,
around
I was in a band called What Peggy Wants in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I played in another band called the Velt. Various degrees of success, mostly not, which is where I am today. I played in a band called Jolene, guitar, violin.
Something I wanted to point out really quick is I'm looking at a beautiful, for our video portion of this Attack of Opportunity, I am looking at a beautiful composing room. The man is in the room where the magic happens. I'm looking at guitars on the wall, mics, keyboards. I'm so jealous.
I am in the room. Yeah, it's a lot of toys. Collected over a lot of years.
Where's your studio? You're in the States, yes?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm honestly surprised that, well, you know what? Never mind. I won't get into that. Everybody knows I'm a huge Glass Cannon podcast fan and the Cannonite, and I'm always trying to relay or, tie the strings to them. Their neighbor, 5 guys from New York doing a podcast who I constantly compare mine to. Got to really stop doing that. It's becoming an obsession. Anyway, so Canada is calling Brooklyn. But the cool thing about the internet is you can be anywhere. We were talking to Norway the other day. We were talking to, we got an interview coming up from Serbia. But today we're talking to Brooklyn. And in Brooklyn, Tim is making magic happen on the tabletopaudio.com. Now, I saw your promo. I'm going to try and run it if I can. Your Patreon promo. And you talked about how you were gaming with your sons. And then you started using. So when did you get into the actual, you said comic books, everything. When did you get into actual tabletop RPGs? Where along that journey?
Oh, that was, in the 80s, I think. My brother and I had the D&D Red Box, and we would just do graph paper dungeons and make shopping lists. And I'm not sure how much of the game we actually played, but we loved the prep work. We loved the stats and the, rolling up characters and things like that. We would play eventually. And then I just stopped for years and years after that. And then I had kids, and I started thinking, when you have your own kids, you're like, you get to relive your own childhood again. And I thought, this is really fun. Or I had a great time doing this. I'm going to try getting them involved in role-playing games, see if they like it. So we did some really simple versions of, I think I got the D&D Red Box, and I modified the rules. This was from 4E era when they were doing it. And then the idea for tabletop audio came because I was just thinking I needed another way to get them, immersed in the game. And so it just kind of put together a couple of things. I think the first thing I did was drips in a cave. It wasn't 10 minutes. It was just a loop. And they got really into it. So I thought, this is cool. I'm going to continue. I'm going to do a couple more of these. And I think I had about 10 or 12. And then I decided, I'll make the website, put them up there and see if anybody's interested. And I logged onto the RPG, on Reddit, the RPG group. And I said, hey, I just made this thing and, whatever. People were like, oh, that's cool. Make some more. So I started making more, and this is what happened 4 years later.
How did you get into Roll20, getting it up there?
A lot of people were asking if they could access it. And then I think people asked them for me, and then they contacted me, and they've been great. They're really supportive. And we talked and said, made a deal, and we're like, okay, great, let's do it.
No, that's great. And I have a bad habit, my wife tells me, our executive producer, Cheryl Ball, of interviewing myself while interviewing the customer. It's just the connection, because you'll spark a memory. 4 years ago, you're playing with your son and you're making drips in a cave.
Yes.
3 years ago, was one of the last games I had at my house, and I had some of our own cast members, Matt Witt, Ryan Messina, and my own son, introducing him at 15 to the Star Wars Saga system, which we are now running as an actual podcast.
Right.
And I love the dual, like the similarity there, the duality, where someone like yourself, who I have a great amount of respect for, is putting something out there, content that's so available, especially free. Now, you are on Patreon, and I'm telling you guys, this guy he's working hard. He's putting up layers, not just like 8-bit did background video game. This music that I've been using in my podcast and the network from Tim is layered tracks. There's a lot there in each track if you listen carefully. And I think that really adds to the immersion. You can come up with a sound effect and there's a light music playing with it, or you can come up with music and I noticed there's the odd sound effect going off through the track, and that's brilliant. I think that's bloody brilliant myself. So fast forwarding to lately, you're on Roll20, you're established in the jukebox, you have your own Patreon with a decent support, but you know what? Like, being a content creator, man, there's always bills and stuff, and you get it paying for yourself, and then one day the dream is to have it become your sole profession after the obsession part. I think we've passed the obsession part, because there's some really good, you could really see the work, man. I'm telling you. Sorry, I'm beginning to gush. It's hard for me to interview people that I'm a big fan of, because I just start going all fanboy. So you know what? I'm going to go back to my handy dandy list of questions. So you've been gaming with your brother since you were a kid, and you've been into the RPGs, but there is that jump. There is that sort of, we were talking about you and your kids and making it from them. What made you decide to actually go public? I can't say commercial, because people could just put stuff up, and
So
you said Reddit was your gateway to the net?
I mean, to go public with the site, I just thought my kids were responding really well to it. And it was just maybe other kids out there, maybe somebody, another person. And I originally was just thinking about role-playing gamers. But very quickly, I started getting emails from authors. And it occurred to me, of course, that's what role-playing is. You're sitting around the table telling stories, and anything that kind of helps the immersion will enable you to tell a better story. And so when an author emails me and says, when I'm writing a new chapter and it's set in a certain place, I put on one of your, I find it on your site, and I'm there, and I just write so much better. And I was like, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. And so lots of, fantasy, sci-fi writers are using it. And then teachers have been using it, so all these little areas of the sort of, the net have been kind of coming to me. Like, teachers say, creative writing classes, for instance, writing prompts, like, write a story about something, and then the kids won't have any ideas. And then they'll put on, an ambience, just, broadcasting it in the class, and the kids will all of a sudden have ideas. So, for me, it was just about creating ideas, being the spark,
the inspiration,
to help
the views. Oh, yes.
Create stories.
I'll give you an example how your stuff is being put to good use by us. We shot a scene, like I said, and the Star Wars cast are currently in an underwater dome city at the bottom of the ocean on a water planet. And having something like, we were playing your track Sunken Temple in the background, and then I was layering over busy spaceport, a little quieter. And when they step off that ship, even though they're technically in an airspace in a dome, that presence of the pressure of the one track and the busy spaceport, like it sold the scene far better than I could as a DM. And then the players got into it that much more, you would think. But like I said, I layer this stuff post-production. My guys are great. They can, if I describe something, they really put themselves in. So your work helps bring the audience up to our own headspace. Myself and my crew are already there, and this is what we're choosing to sort of show. It's like, this is what we're thinking, but we can't describe it in words. And we bring tabletop audio in, and it's like, yes, this is what we were feeling. This is what we were thinking. This is what we were imagining. And that's how we decide what tracks to use from the content creators that are so graciously putting stuff up, like yourself. So my next question for you, sir, is, you've got it back and forth with, like you said, you've got people emailing and everything. Is everything channeled through Tabletop Audio? Do you have other projects out there on the net that the schools or something have contacted with?
No, but I do custom tracks all the time. Like, I've been doing a bunch of escape rooms lately, which is kind of the live action version of this. So they'll, an escape room will contact me and show me pictures of the interior of the room, tell me the story of the room. And we'll kind of craft, an audio environment to be played, for their guests. So that's been fun.
Are you saying you're doing commission work? Like you're open to
I've been doing that. I mean, that's one of the, part of tabletop audio is like, is an ad for my commissioned work. I do custom, composing and custom ambiences and
we'll definitely have to talk after the show. That's a problem with, like I said, you have all these great tracks, and then it's like, and now I need the scene to shift to this, and then we start listening through all your stuff, or we'll go to another content creator and go through it. It's like, you know what? I'd rather leave the scene blank than put in the wrong stuff and leave it to someone's imagination. So we've got work for you. Yeah, I have to start.
Well, I mean, send me a description of it, because I love having. Sometimes I'll sit down to work and I'll think I just don't have any ideas, and I'll go to this. I have this ongoing list of suggestions that people have, and I love being able to pick something off the suggestion and say, oh, this is what I'm working on this week. It's sometimes people ask for something that's so specific that I'm probably not going to do, and I let them know. But like, the more general, the better. If you can imagine other people, listening to a certain thing, then I'll make that for the site. Yeah,
like if you say busy spaceport as opposed to like I want the Mos Eisley's Cantina, and you're treading on Williams, copyright stuff, you can't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's true.
Because that's the first thing we'd ask you for, is like more sci-fi, but whether it's general and your music has a Mass Effect feel or Trek feel or Star Wars feel, or just something very alien that's your original work. People have that option to pick and choose and put it together and make their own thing with it, which is what I really like doing. But let's talk about
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say finish what you're saying, because I got a new question for you.
No, I was just going to say that no matter what genre I'm currently working on, I annoy everybody else. So if I'm working on sci-fi tracks, people are like, man, some more fantasy, please. I'm in the middle of this great, fantasy game. Or if I'm doing horror, like all October, Halloween, I'm doing horror soundtracks. And
in the mood.
We're like, oh, enough of the horror. Give me some sci-fi. So I have to spread it out all, around. Otherwise I risk alienating.
But that's a good sign of a widespread fan base. We were recently contacted about our dice rolls. Some of the younger generation would like to see dice rolls on YouTube as opposed to get into the theater of the mind thing. And they're like, well, how do we know we're getting those rolls? And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, Frank hates Roll20 because he keeps rolling natural ones. We're not just doing that to be funny. He's really, he gets upset. And we keep saying, take your camera, shoot your dice tray, and show me those rolls, and I'll, they're legit. So that's one of the reasons that got us into video. And then we're like, wait a minute, I should do the interviews, learn our stuff. And on that topic of trying something new is what leads us into my next question. Your sound pad is phenomenal. I went on your site recently and it's like, what is this sound pad thing? And not only is it a segregated list of which you can again put into categories. I just want ambience, I just want sound effects. You can see the whole thing. You've taken a theme. Let's talk about the last one I just used, the Deep Six theme. And you have motors, torpedoes, hatches opening, things you wouldn't even know you needed until you see it there. Sneaky suspense, action suspense, music, sound effects, all layered. And you have a link that you can send to your players so that when you hit this stuff, it goes across the net to them because they're tagged into your site. What inspired that? Like, that's brilliant. That's beyond brilliant. Because I have so much trouble with stuff like the voiceover and using live feeds for my players to hear what I'm hearing while we're recording, as opposed to me just putting in a lot of effects post-edit.
Well, in response to the link, I have to give a shout out to a tabletop audio user from Germany. Hello, Merton. Thank you again.
Hi, Merton.
who said, you know what I'd love to do? And he described exactly that and said, so I made it for you. Do you want to check it out? And I was like, wait, what? People are always asking me for features, and I'm a very poor programmer. I've done everything on the site myself except for this one part, and I'm just competent enough to be embarrassed that my code is really awful. But I get it to where it works, and then I move on. It's just ugly. So he sent me this working example, and then we worked with it for the next couple of weeks until we kind of tweaked it, and that was it. And now he's back doing his PhD in some advanced comp sci something or other, so he hasn't really been able to.
You humble yourself. I've been to your site, man. Like, The large icons where you post a picture to sort of give an idea of the feel of the music, and you hover it over and you have the option to download it on the spot, just play it to listen to it, and it'll keep playing as you look at other stuff. And it's in a large sort of easy checkerboard, going through. I think your site is great to navigate.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
The pictures that you use to sort of back the music along with, and my personal favorite is there are other sites out there where you think you're getting royalty free, which means as you use it in your stuff, you don't have to pay them, but they still want an upfront licensing. And there's things like Pond 5 or whatever, where you listen to the music and every 5 seconds there's like a watermark and it's going, Pond 5, you're listening to this. And it's like, yeah, I get it. You will get my money, but can I listen to the track? And I'm listening to your stuff. I used one recently in our Dice Before Dishonor, shameless plug, called Alvin Glade.
Yes.
And I really like this one.
Very peaceful.
Yes.
Very zen.
And I kept waiting. I was so programmed by other internet that I'm just waiting for,
Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should put, you're listening to Tabletop Audio.
Yeah, you're listening. No, that'll just piss people off. That you'll lose people. You'll lose customers.
No, I would never do that.
From your free, I'm saying you're losing customers from your free site, but no, that's just a nightmare of,
No, the sound pads were when I started the site, the sound pads are actually a 180 in terms of what I wanted to do with the site. I wanted something that was really, really easy, and I didn't want somebody with their nose buried in a laptop clicking individual buttons. I just thought that's just antithetical to what I want from the game table. Mm-hmm. And so it was very specifically, I wanted them to be these 10-minute long, and I just chose that number arbitrarily. Just because I thought it seemed long enough, but not too long, because it takes a while to make. And then I have to, when I'm making them, I'm listening to them over and over again. I probably listen to them 20 or 30 times. So whatever, that's lots of hours of listening. But then people started asking me they wanted more control. And I thought, oh man, I don't know if I want to do this. 2, I don't know if I can do this. I had to do a lot of learning, and then once I started working on them, I realized 2 things. One was that it's a really fun process to make. When I make a sound pad, they are kind of enclosed environments, so it's like scenic descriptions of an environment. And then I'll be able to. So I spent a lot of time thinking what's in it, what would work, and a 30-40 sound pad. I'll probably make 60 or 70 sounds and just I'm tossing things all of it. I'll like an individual sound, but I'll realize there's no way this is going to work with other sounds in here. So it's a cool workflow, and it breaks up my process. So I'll be working on a 10-minute ambience. I'll do that for a few months, and then I'll go work on a sound pad. The sound pads take a lot longer. So I really enjoyed it.
No, the film noir is one of my personal favorite. You got footsteps, you got dark alley. I mean, anyone can go to that trope, whether you're in a sci-fi or you're in a fantasy, and there's a trench coat guy in the alley, or there's the femme fatale or whatever, and the effects that you picked to use, it doesn't occur to someone to like, oh yeah, like some footsteps or some quiet running down alley. But my favorite is the fact that you give options. You don't just have like, here are footsteps and here are this. It's like, here's running footsteps, here's sneaking footsteps, here's the loading of a revolver, here's the loading of an automatic. You always seem to have like a multi-option. Back to the Deep Six one, there was 2 different engine rooms, not here is just the engine room for every ship.
That was to me, because I wanted it to work for Hunt for Red October and Das Boot,
or
The Abyss. I mean, the graphic is taken from The Abyss. So I wanted it to be, every era of underwater adventure, not just.
Yeah, those are the 2 movies that came to mind when I was using
those are the movies I watched.
That's great. That's great. So you're channeling your inner Tim. You're like, I'm glad that inspiration is getting. No,
I love. I mean, I watch movies in the genres with a notepad. I have it somewhere around here. It's ridiculous. This notepad of, I can just find like the scrawls of. I don't know which one this is, but scrawls.
He's showing the
like
fourth
this
graph
sound,
paper
this sound,
he's
this
holding
sound.
up. Yeah, it is.
And then I'll cross them off as I make them. So I'll just watch these movies, and every time a sound or they're in an environment that I'm like, oh, that's really cool. What's happening in that? And then I'll just loop that. Like there's a clock ticking that I didn't notice the first 7 times that I was doing that. Maybe I should have a watch ticking. That's kind of neat.
The Germans would fire torpedoes, and they used stopwatch to help them assist in the
the distances
and everything.
Yeah.
And something else I recently learned that I found fascinating, because I really like the torpedo launch, is you have sort of a inside, that last moment in the barrel kind of sound, and then an exterior. Most movies just have an exterior of the shot, and you seem to kind of go in that mind space of like, I'm in, I'm literally getting loaded in the tube from inside the sub in that last split second before it comes out and then off.
I listened to that. I recorded that section from Das Boot where they're firing the torpedoes, and I listened to it over and over again and try to deconstruct all the different sound design. I mean, as a sound designer, this is what we do. We because sounds are never, one thing. There's like 7 tracks, 8 tracks of sounds, just to make that torpedo sound. So it's like, oh, I've got this part and this works, and there's a pan, and there's the kind of, cavitation or the, tremolo effect that I have to put in there. So it's a lot of fun just to kind of deep dive on individual sounds like that.
Yes, I'm actually getting into editing and having to learn it from the ground up in the last 2 years, and I am far from really knowing what I'm doing, but it's so much fun in those moments to play around with, like you said, layering an effect, or and that's how the hours tick by. It's like for someone to just to listen to, like, that's a 3-second bit. It's like, yeah, I spent days on that. That was
you're going down the rabbit hole.
I call that sound effect October, because it took the month of October, not the movie and an hour listening to, and then you just put it together.
Yeah.
That kind of
well,
thing.
Wait till you do that, and then you realize at the end. I mean, I throw away so much stuff. I produce absolute crap, and nobody ever talks about how much crap they produce. But I'll make stuff and I'll work on pieces and everything. At the end of the day, I'm like, what's bothering me about this is that it's not good.
I can't use this.
And I could polish this all day long. So you have to walk away. And I think
I'm glad you have that option, because, like I said, for someone that we have a recording of a show, I'm forced to work with what, the raw recording. There's no, hey guys, can we shoot this again? I got a message on a board from a fan going, hey, you have an entire episode of a fight missing from one of your shows. It's like, yeah, we asked them to reshoot it. And that was like, they're not going to reshoot the fight. It was painful. The character died. Just please move on. We apologize. The audio got botched. It was never sent to me. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to make you feel better that even if you toss something at the end of your day, because once you put something on the net, it's there for everybody. You can't sort of take that back. So no, if you.
Well, I have actually snuck in. Not that anybody would know, but better versions of things. I've only done that about 3 or 4 times.
Oh,
really? I listened to something, you always have to do it with, how like when you're mixing, you always wait a day and then you listen to it with fresh ears, and all of the bad things just jump out at you, which is great because you can just get zoned in on a specific element and everything sounds good. And then you realize, oh, no, that's not good. So occasionally one of those will sneak by me and I'll release something that I'm not as thrilled with. And just kind of,
you're going along. Is there someone you can run it by and say, I don't have a day. I don't have that kind of time editing.
Let's call this track Alvin Glade 2A.
What we do is I have what they call a Connor Bash and a Matt Witt, and they are quick to listen and jump on. Like, why is this so fast and speedy?
Oh, extra ears are
yeah,
always...
because it's and like, oop, crap. Back up, put it all down, take it all back down, or what, because I'm always sort of under the gun to get stuff up for a deadline, and I'm listening to it as you're editing. You think, okay, you go back, you listen, you fix, you go back, you listen, you fix, and by the time you get to the end, it's like, okay, it's good, solid. I've spent an hour per 10 minutes of track. I spend 3 to 6 hours per episode per podcast, and I'm lucky to get 2 done a week, let alone and we're juggling all this stuff. Do you have that kind of pressure? Like, are you filling orders where you're like, I'm sorry, everyone, the website of fantasy has to wait because I'm filling an order for fantasy or sci-fi, or like, are you under that kind of gun? Is basically the question I'm trying to get to here.
No, not so much. I mean, people are very supportive. I definitely feel because I have patrons who are expecting a certain level, and my Patreon is monthly. It's not per item. I know a lot of Patreon campaigns are, every time I do a blog post or every time I release a video, you pay. So mine is not, by the individual thing. It's just monthly. And so I feel, I wouldn't say pressure. I feel inspired to continue to make things. But every once in a while, like I just released a new feature for the sound pads, which is the ability to play sounds on an interval. So you can click, play this, bat noise every 30 seconds, or play this footsteps every minute. So now you can actually click less and set up your scenes, and they're automated. So you can add complexity to your soundscapes without actually making your job more complex. So while I was doing that, that's about 3.5 weeks of code. So every once in a while, I'm writing on my Patreon page. I'm like, hey, I haven't disappeared. I'm in Codeville, in Code World, climbing Code Mountain, and so I do feel a little bit of pressure to sometimes get out of that. And I'm gonna make an audio track. And part of that is just the way I work. Once I get too focused on one thing, I want to take a break and do something else.
So. Are you at the point?
Did I answer that question?
Yeah, no,
all?
that's brilliant. No, that's brilliant.
Okay.
No, trust me, I have a roundabout way of getting to my point, and I enjoy the sort of the larger picture, the bigger story, instead of just saying, I spent 3 weeks coding, and that's the, so no, I appreciate the sort of bigger picture that you're painting for us. A couple quick questions before we run out of time, because I know you have to go. First, I'm assuming with enough Patreonage that you can, because I've seen your page that you've stated that you can and are currently doing this for a living as opposed to what you used to do. I always enjoy the fact that the Geek the Nerd comes from every walk of life. Lawyers, doctors, not just the tech savvy guys. And every time I spring this question on somebody, they're like, no, really, I'm the tech guy from, it's like, oh, really, I'm the manager of this or whatever. What did you do? What put food on the table before you be able to get into this love of this field, which eventually pays the bills?
I am on career number 40 or something at this point. I mean, I have done everything. I was in bands. I worked in restaurants. I was a cook. I did a web design for a while in the 90s. And then I kind of morphed into composing, and my bread and butter was corporate videos. So I would do, annual report DVDs for companies, where they would just be showing pie charts. And I would joke to my friends that I did music for pie charts. And they would laugh, and I go, no, really, I'm actually making music for pie charts. And so that was a really good, that business. It's a lot like photography in a way that it's hard to compete with stock. People are like, oh, I'm just going to grab some things from the net. And even these huge companies started doing more of that. So the business kind of started to decline, and that gave me time. I was like, well, I like doing this. I'm going to continue this. So the rise of tabletop audio and the sort of fall of the more corporate work.
I hear you, brother. I started off my trained trade was a photographer, believe it or not, and it was either corporate or wedding photography, and it was all terrible. Made my way through landscaping, and now I'm always saying, like, well, what does Jeff do? Well, actually, Jeff is a greengrocer. I'm the guy at your local store that that gives you fresh produce. This is what pays the bills while I spend all day dreaming and daydreaming about my gaming, and then nights and days off doing this. But you're here. You've made it. So we talked about your latest project being getting into the sound pad option, which is brilliant. Please keep it up. I'm sure I speak for more than myself. I'm actually going to expose my players tonight. We are shooting the pilot for Crownfall, Season 1, Episode 1 of our Dice Before Dishonor pod, because the Season 0 was like a big prologue, and I plan on using your sound pad for these guys to actually hear directly, as opposed to us saying all the post edit, to delight and amaze and put them even more, in the scene. especially some of your dinner party stuff, and that's going to be very good for the nobility that they're playing. But what's in the future for Tim and Tabletop Audio? I gotta ask, or can you give your fans, what's the next thing? What's the next thing?
More and better. And sometimes I don't know what the next thing is. Sometimes somebody tells me what the next thing should be, and people email me with suggestions all the time, which I love. I read everything. I try to respond to every email I get. And a lot of them, I write down everything. I have a Google Doc with every single suggestion I've ever got, and some of them are awesome, and some of them are not maybe doable by me. So just trying to think. A lot of people want an app, although it works very well on mobile. I understand the desire for an app, and that's something that's maybe in the future, but it wouldn't be done by me. So I'm going to have to get somebody else to help.
That would be a shortcoming. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, you want laptop speakers are crappy enough. You want this sound. You don't want it coming out of your phone. You want this Bluetooth to a decent Bose speaker or something, or it's gonna, the guy's working days are kind of lost, kind of, poking out of the phone. I understand the apps for dice rollers and pre-gens and tablets, and how the pen and paper has turned into a laptop with your buddies around the table. This I get, but I'm asking you, people of Earth,
lots of people
don't destroy Tim's work by having it pumping out of a phone. Make sure that sucker's hooked up to a decent speaker system. I don't think anything elaborate, but something better than than your iPhone, because you're going to be missing out. Those layers, those extra layers above and below, will be really not put through the phone. I'm telling you, and you'll miss out on a lot of hard work and a lot of experience that you could enjoy at your tabletop from the audio. It's in the name, people. We've been talking to Tim out of Brooklyn on Attack of Opportunity, and he can be reached, or his work can be found, on tabletopaudio.com. And you have an email for commissions you want to publicly?
It's GM@Tabletop Audio.
There you go. Drop him a line. First of all, tell him how much you love your work before you start demanding more fantasy over 5. So, give the guy some love here. This is for content creators. That one fan, that one person going, hey, this is pretty cool. Thank you for putting this up there. That has a huge effect on any content creator. Anywhere, I'm telling you. Even
it's true.
I don't talk about a whole bunch of gushing and stalking and I'm outside your window. Please look towards the north wall. No, you don't want to go there. I'm just talking about, hey, I love your stuff. I'm using it. This is what I'm doing with it. We love hearing stories about this is what I'm taking your work and doing with it, which I've been doing all through this interview. Because his Tabletop Audio is a main part of the Mongers network. Listen for it. It's in the credits. It's there. You'll find it. And I'll bet you that is the most immersive part above our crappy acting that you as a listener to our shows get into, is because Tim is in the background. I always picture you at the massive pipe organ, Castlevania kind of church thing going on with the wild hair, the Christopher Lloyd thing going on. Haha, another successful track for my minions, putting it out there. But thank you. Thanks for being on the show. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me. This is fun.